Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend with me. This is my very first Hangout, and I guess I'd like to take a few minutes to explain to you exactly what it is I do. People ask me that just about all day, every day. And the short answer is, I'm a connector of dots. The people I work with, the companies I work with, I help them connect the dots. It's as if they have a whole bunch of items on a desk in front of them. They know all those items make sense. They know they want to use all those items to help make themselves successful, to live prosperous lives. Only up until then, they just haven't been able to connect the dots. And that's where I come in. I'm going to share a story with you. Well, I'm going to share a couple stories with you. I'm going to try to stay as close to time as I possibly can today. I'm going to tell you that this is the first time I've done anything like this, so if I happen to stumble over my words a little bit, I beg your indulgence. Hopefully, as the half hour goes on, I'll become a little more comfortable. But I want to share a story with you, how I got to do what it is I do, because over the next few weeks, I'm going to share with you how you can make the world you want every day you're alive, which I think is a really, really cool thing. I think if you have the opportunity to create new experiences, to formulate new ideas, to go where maybe you've only dreamed before, then you're creating the world you want. Now, I've spent 40 years working in operations, working in training and development, working in human resources. And I've got to see a real beautiful mosaic of people who have set out on their journey and made it, people who've stopped halfway, and people who decided 15 minutes before not to start. And so, that being said, I've learned how to help people connect those dots so they can see a clear picture of where it is they want to go. Technically, I'm what you call a career development consultant and coach. But when you get to know me a little better, and you get to know some of the methodology I employ to help the people I work with, you're going to see that this is something so unique and so different that it's going to blow your mind. It's already blown mine. Okay, first story. It's a sad one if you have Kleenex. Many, many years ago, being the early 80s, I was working for a Fortune 5 company. I was in management. I was a frontline supervisor, didn't know what day it was, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Worked with a gentleman who was moved from department to department. And he just didn't seem to fit in and function, just didn't seem to be able to find his niche. And one afternoon on the way home from work, he had a heart attack. The ambulance came, took him to the hospital, died about 3 o'clock in the morning. So, of course, when you get to work and, this is a company that, the location I worked at had about 3,000 people in it. It's really true. When more than one person knows something, it's not a secret. By the time I got to work in the morning, I found out my coworker had passed away. And that's not sad enough. The boss I had at the time gathered the 8 or 9 of us together, about half hour after the shift started, into his office. And he said, well, I guess y'all have heard the news that Mel died. And we all kind of nodded our heads. And he said, but he wasn't a very good supervisor to begin with. And I sat there for a minute and looked at some of the people I was close to in that room. And I thought, did I just hear what I just heard? The guy died because he didn't do his job. Now, as horrific and far-fetched as that may seem to you, I want you to stop for a moment, and I want you to look at the times in your own career where you felt your worth as a human being and an individual has been determined by how well you did something on a given day, week, month, or year? It's happened to me. In spirit of full disclosure, I've done it too. How many times have this thought crossed your head? They ain't worth a fill in the blank with whatever invective you choose to use. And so I sat back and I thought about the guy I worked with who passed away, whose legacy in a company he had worked at for 32 years was, well, he really didn't do his job very well. And truth be told, he didn't. Because what ended up happening is somewhere about halfway through his career, he stopped being able to connect the dots. And what was worse, nobody was there to help him. Now, I've met a lot of people like him throughout my career. Again, in the spirit of full disclosure and honesty, I've been that person. There have been times I've been scratching what little hair's left on my head, wondering, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Newsflash for you folks. This whole Google Hangout thing, does it keep any of you up at night? But you know what? Somewhere in there, somewhere in that mess where I kind of feel like, gosh, I hope I ain't blowing this, is the understanding and the assurance that I'm going to be able to do this. And before I'm done today, I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to share briefly with you the 4 things that I feel help make us effective in our lives and in our careers. And you know what the really neat thing is about it? A lot of times people say, oh, well, you help people find jobs. Oh, you work with people that are looking for work. Yeah. I work with companies too. You want to know the one thing most job searchers and most companies have in common with one another? Neither one of them knows what they want. Oh, well, I need a job, John. Well, I'm looking for fill in the blank, John. And I think when you're on either side of that equation, people are dumbfounded when I tell them that. Most job seekers, most companies aren't aware of what they're looking for. I work with entrepreneurs like myself because somewhere out there, whether it's an employee or a client, and I'm going to give you a preview of what I'm going to talk about next week, because the title of my Hangout next week is going to be, You Start Telling a Story the Minute You Walk in the Room. Well, the room's changed, ain't it? And I guess the best way to figure out how it's changed and why sometimes I end up scratching my head and uttering all kinds of words that aren't repeatable in a family hangout is that we live in a world today. Well, let me ask you this question, because all of you, most of you who are watching this are of the internet age, the computer age. So now imagine, God forbid, that your computer crashes, smoke comes out of it, it groans and it's dead. And someone shows up with a manual to repair a tube TV. Says, here you go, this ought to get you started. That's basically how we continue to view developing and hiring people for our organizations. That's how, in many respects, we view finding clients. We think it's magic. We're using tools and techniques. I went into the workforce for good in 1973. You know, we're still using the same shell, the same outline of recruiting, hiring, and developing. My gosh, when I went into the workforce, there were 3 channels of television, 4 on a good day. The internet was something you saw in science fiction movies. It was being developed by the government. And computers, well, in 1973, to most people, computers were data processing. But if you sit down and talk with any human resource professional that's been around for a while, you're going to get the drift that we're using the same techniques we used almost 40 years ago. That's why I do what I do. I sit back and I've had the wonderful experience of being able to sit in interview rooms and watch people come in and hit home runs. I've also been unfortunate enough to sit in interview rooms and watch people get tagged out at first base and didn't have a chance. And it's not because there's any faulty mechanism within them. It's not because of their credentials. It's because they don't know how. So I connect the dots. I help them learn how. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories. And at the end of this, we'll be able to weave, a lot in so you can kind of get a drift of how I do connect all the dots. And I'm going to tell you two stories. And for those of you who are social scientists and social engineers, let me start out by saying the two stories I'm going to tell you have two people of the same gender who lived in the same geographic area, and by that I mean they lived within 25 to 30 miles of each other. Okay. They both lived in semi-rural areas, small communities under 10,000 people, and they both went to college. They both got degrees in areas that could potentially limit their ability to find meaningful employment, i.e. repay their student loans, car payment, and maybe rent an apartment. Okay, so the first person I met, and let's call her Carol, and by the way, I don't use real names here because in many respects with a lot of the folks I've worked with, I'm bound by confidentiality till they close the lid on my coffin. So Carol, I met at the job fair. A client of mine was desperate to find some people to come to work for them, needed a bunch of people in a hurry. I don't view job fairs as being a prime way of finding folks. If you do, I honor that. Namaste. I don't. It means you're throwing the doors open and whoever walks in, walks in. Maybe this sounds a little selfish, but you end up talking to people. Kid you not, at the job fair once, I interviewed a 78-year-old man who was looking to get back in the workforce because he was bored. So, young lady approaches me, sits down at the table I'm at, dressed well, spoke well. I said, I'm looking for a job. Well, what kind of job are you looking for? Oh, I'll do just about anything. Well, how come? Well, I've been working 2-3 part-time jobs. You know, I'm not going to go on with this. You guys know the lay of the land, especially today. What's your degree in? German. German. Why did you get a degree in German? And she almost prefaced her remarks by saying, John, sit back. This is going to take a while. I'll give you the short version. Last person in her high school class to declare to go to college. Principal and guidance counselor called her down a month before graduation. Do you realize everybody in your graduating class, about 200 people, have selected a college and selected a major, and you haven't? Are you planning on going to college? Looked at him and said, yeah, I am, but I don't know what I want to study. What do you mean you don't know you want to study? Go to college and figure it out while you're there. Well, I'd prefer not to do that. I kind of like to have a path for myself. Well, what did you like in high school? And she said she really enjoyed her German classes because she enjoyed her German teacher. Did more than just teach him the language, taught him the culture, the whole 9 yards. So off she trots to college and gets a degree in German. Put puts herself about $30,000 in debt, and comes out on the other side and realizes that there's not a great big market to do anything in German other than teach, which is what I suggested to her. I said, well, how about teaching? She said, there's only one problem with that. I hate kids. Do you ever think of going to work for the government? My dad doesn't want me to join the military. I could end up working at a foreign embassy, but I've been told I need to join the military. We'd sit here and tear this apart and find out all kinds of different things. And I honestly felt sorry for her because very bright, very intelligent, not really focused. Why did you go to college? Well, because everybody else went to college. I'll get to this down the road in another hangout, but there's a lemming effect. And if you know about lemmings, when one starts to follow the other, they eventually all go off the cliff. So let's talk about the second person. Okay, Linda. Now, Linda came from an affluent family, but interestingly enough, went to a public school. And I meant to tell you the other person went to a private school. Came from a middle to lower middle class family, which I thought the demographic here was really interesting. But at any rate, Linda goes to a public school. Now, Linda's an athlete. As a matter of fact, Linda was the most valuable player in the state softball tournament the year her high school came out of nowhere and won the state tournament. Linda had multiple scholarship offers to play softball at a number of colleges that if I started rattling them off to you, you'd know who they were. Linda says, I ain't playing softball in college. I had 4 years of that. She told me this when I met her, and I had to laugh. She said, John, I never got to party. So she borrowed some money, and she went off to a state university, and she got a degree in an area of fashion design. Another real marketable skill. Why'd you get a degree in fashion design? Well, it just seemed interesting to me. Now, when I met Linda, she had had 2 jobs since she got out of college, and she did well in those jobs. She just didn't like them. She hadn't been able to connect the dots. So I said to her, Linda, what is it that you eventually want to do? Well, I'd like to be a pharmaceutical sales rep with a degree in fashion merchandising. All righty then. So I did a little bit of research because I'll be the first person to admit to you I don't know everything, just most things. And I came back and found out that most people that worked as pharmaceutical reps had a degree in chemistry, chemical biology, areas in college that I stayed far, far away from. And apparently Linda did too. So I came back and we had lunch together one day, and I said, look, I don't want to rain on your parade, but here's what's going on. Nodded her head, looked at me, and she said, hey, you know what? What do you think my next step needs to be? Because I know I'm not going to get there right away. Where do you think I need to go? And I said, well, let me give that some thought. So she kind of opens up a little portfolio she's got, pulls it out, and said, hey, I found this job that's like a home health care product company. And they need somebody to do sales in a geographical area that's close to my home. What do you think? Do you think that'll work for me? I said, well, it's worth a shot, okay? And she said, can you do me a favor? When you get back to your office, could you kind of price that job for me? And by that, what she meant is there's a formula you throw in for a geographical area, number of employees, blah, 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 and it'll tell you what a median salary might be. Did it, came back and gave her the figure. She said, oh, that's not enough money. I said, what do you mean? Well, I want at least $8,000 more a year. I said, Linda, I'm telling you, in the geographical area, and you know, remember the lemmings going over the cliff? Most human resource people say, oh, well, gee, if we don't meet your salary needs, thank you very much. Have a nice day. She said, that's what I want. I said, then you better be prepared to go in and knock their socks off when you interview them and create the value. And that's where you start connecting the dots. I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself here. And I'm going to tell you the difference between Linda and the difference between the other young lady. The first and most important factor of creating the world you want every day you're alive is to believe you deserve to be successful. See, you walk into an interview room or you pick up the phone, and this just doesn't apply to the Lindas of this world. Let's say you're a marketing consultant, or let's say you're a life coach, okay? It would really be nice if people just knocked on your door and said, excuse me, oh, you live here, I'd like to do business with you. You and I go on job interviews every day of the week. If we don't believe we deserve success, why should anybody else? And I sat back in my chair and I realized that Linda already had that part down. And she went in and she told them, here's what I'm going to do for you, but I'm not only going to do that, I'm going to be able to do this, and I have experience here, and this and that, and went through a whole host of things, and called me about 9:30 on a Saturday night after she and her fiance had finished celebrating and said, hey, John, guess what? I got the money I wanted. Now, Linda worked for that company for about 3 years. 2.5 years into her experience, my phone rings. Hey, John, it's Linda. Do you remember me? Sure do. I'm ready to be a pharmaceutical rep. Okay. Tell me what you've done in the interim. I'm going to share a little something with you here. Most jobs are discovered and filled not by message boards, not by recruiters, not by monster.com, but by acquaintances, not friends, acquaintances. Said to Linda, it's your lucky day, because at the time I was working with a personal trainer. This is prior to me hurting my back. I was working with a personal trainer who, prior to that experience, had been a recruiter for a pharmaceutical firm. I said, let me ask you something. Would you be open to talking to her? She said, sure. So I went to Jen, my trainer, and said, hey, Jen, working with this person. Oh, yeah, I'd be more than glad to. So they got their heads together. This is going to give you point number 2 in creating the world you want every day. You not only deserve to be successful, you're worth all the effort you put into yourself. Let's go back to our poor dear friend who has a degree in German. You know, the late Zig Ziglar, who is one of my personal heroes, once said, you can build a house in Pity City, you just can't live there. My poor friend with the German degree decided, well, life's over, I guess I'll work 3 or 4 part-time jobs, because boy, I made a whole bunch of mistakes. Now you go back to Linda, and Linda says, well, you know, I've got a degree in an area that has a very slim niche to be marketed in, but you know what, the heck with that. I deserve success, and you know what? I'm worth all the hard work and effort I put into it. So there are days and nights I'm not going to be able to hang out with my friends. There's times I'm going to have to spend studying, learning, everything that goes with getting what you want. Is that any different if you're a coach or a consultant or a supervisor or a boss? You see the beauty of this? It's like, and I can't remember what president said it, but the 1,000 points of light, and we're all interconnected. So, Linda develops a relationship with a former pharmaceutical recruiting rep. Point number 3. You are who you hang around with. I got a text message about an hour before this broadcast from a client who I'd been working with and kind of fell off the radar for a while. And the text message simply said this: I need to talk to you. I have made some real positive changes in my life, and I want to let you know that all through the process, the only thing I kept hearing was your voice telling me, you are who you hang around with. Good people hang around with good people who challenge them. Well, wait a minute, John, aren't we all good people? Sure. The girl with the degree in German was a wonderful human being. I have no doubt, child of God. But if you took her and you put her with Linda and you said, you guys spend some time together, Linda's either going to lift her up or the other girl's going to drag her down. From where I sit, I'm not a gambler. I'm a risk taker. I'm not a gambler. I'm not going to take everything I worked very hard to attain simply to kind of say, well, and trust me, I've heard everything. Well, John, I've known him since kindergarten. Well, John, you know, I mean, they've been my neighbor since like before I was born. I mean, I just can't. You are who you hang around with. Finish the story up for you here. About 6 months later, Linda gets hired by a pharmaceutical company, is still working for them, moving up through the ranks, is in her early 30s now. Happy. Talked to her about 6 or 7 months ago. Doing great. What's the difference? The difference is in perception. Now, I'm going to tell you that the tools and techniques I use are not often validated and embraced by the traditional human resource community. As far back as 1990, I was using meditation in the workplace. I was in charge of some focus groups, and they couldn't seem to get settled, so I gussied it up and called it relaxation and breathing, so they didn't think I was, like going to grow long hair and make them wear beads. If you talk to 3 or 4 different clients of mine, they're going to tell you 3 or 4 different ways of connecting the dots, and I think that's the most exciting thing about what I do, and here's why. You make the world you want. How silly would it be for 60-year-old John, I know I don't look 60, for 60-year-old John to sit here and give you a template to move towards success that was based on my life? A lot of you sitting there weren't even alive when I began my road to success. And do you notice how I speak of that success being in the present? Oh, I've made some bad decisions, and I've had some failures. Trust me. But in the end, I view myself as being successful in helping you connect the dots, whether you're a job seeker, whether you're an employer, whether you're a coach, consultant, entrepreneur, whether you're my next door neighbor who's trying to figure out just exactly how he's going to pull everything together to go on vacation. That's what I do. I help you find what you love so you can love what you do. And I use some really cool tools and some really interesting things to get you to that point. The biggest compliment I've ever been paid is this. It's on my website, www.mywalkonwater.com, because I believe we're all capable of walking on water. And it was an early client of mine who said, the best thing John did for me is he helped me look at myself. So you're going to run into a lot of people. You're going to talk to a lot of folks who will say, I'll do this for you, I'll do that for you. But in the end, I view my role as being successful when somebody can turn around and say, I listened to what you told me, and I began that journey to look at myself. The fourth and final thing I want to share with you real briefly is use your intuition. Develop it, trust it, and use it to help you create success. You deserve success. You're worth all the effort you put into yourself. You are who you hang around with. And use your intuition. Develop it. Trust it. It's a gift that we've let sit by the wayside for far too long. I pride myself on having a lot of integrity. I promised you that I would do this first hangout in a half hour, and I ran a minute over, but you know what? For me, who can't shut up, that's pretty good. I want to thank you for being here, and next week I'm going to talk about how you start telling a story the minute you walk in the room, some of the tools, techniques, and practices you can use to optimize. There's a theory called the Heisenberg principle, or a variation of it, that says this, that your attendance at an event outweighs the importance of the event itself. If you want to create the world you want every day you're alive, go ahead. Make your attendance in that room more important than the room itself. Hope you have a wonderful week. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me, and take care of yourselves. Goodbye now.